This locomotive is the largest locomotive VR has ever produced. It's the only member of its class, and it was used on some of the heaviest express trains in Victoria. You know who this is. It's V56, the Jollymont Shunter. In 1923, double-heading locomotives on long-distance journeys had become a serious issue. It was the height of railways, and VR was constantly pushing the 8-car limit on the A2s. Something had to give, and VR wasn't going to resort to triple-heading regular services. By 1928, VR built the S-classes, the first engines to solve this problem. Check out my video on that. They were put to work on the Northeast Line for the next 50 years. But the Northeast Line wasn't the only long-distance line in Victoria. What about the Western Line? The answer was simple. Build more S-classes and send them out west. Or was it that simple? You see, the S's could handle steep gradients. But as they were Pacifics, they couldn't handle sharp turns. Mainly around Ballarat and the notorious Islington Bank. VR needed a strong engine which could handle both sharp corners and steep gradients. Enter the H-Class. 20 years later. In 1923, VR's locomotive designers were considering a mountain-type engine, a 482 locomotive, for their use on the Northeast Line, around the same time as the S. But these plans didn't really come to fruition until about 15 years later. Melbourne, 1939. World War II begins. The first CAC Wurr training aircraft, A-20-3, takes the air. But most importantly, construction on 3, what would be dubbed H-classes, were ordered at Newport. 3 frames were completed, which was all they completed, until the war I mentioned earlier maybe was a little significant, and all progress was halted. As VR already had a shortage of power, really regretting scrapping the older locos, huh? And wartime demanded more than what VR had, 1H was reluctantly given the go-ahead. That being the class leader H220, entering service on the 7th of February, 1941. VR wanted to streamline the locomotive, but they were lucky enough to even get it built. So the plans were scrapped. Although, plan originally was to send it out west, but it was far too heavy for some bridges along the line. Curse you, poor wine trestle versus
23.25-ton axle load!
The works definitely could have been completed, except for the global crisis going on, which was hemorrhaging money. Unfortunately, it would never actually make it on the Western Line, except for that one time with the dynamometer car. I'll cover that later. With VR having to put it to work somewhere, it was given the S-Class treatment and sent out on the Northeast Line, hauling fast goods trains. The line out west was still stuck with double-headed trains, unfortunately. The H would help out by hauling fast expresses, troop trains, and even the Spirit of Progress occasionally when an S wasn't available, which was quite often, as they only really liked to behave while on good quality coal, which was sparse when anything and everything was used for the global conflict. In an average week for the H, it would cover around 5 return trips from Melbourne to Wodonga, at a length of 3,000 kilometers, and hauling 850 tons over the 1 and 50 gradients. In comparison, the C and X's could haul about 650 tons. The H also needed to stop for water much less than its biggest competitor, the S. The H was loved by all, even by VR, at the time when the new mainline diesels were delivered. VR is quoted in a 1953 advertisement saying, "Trains we all are proud of," and promoted H220 as Australia's mightiest engine, and noted the 1125 Albury fast goods. The design for the engine was completed in 1936. able to haul 660 tons of the arduous Islington Bank at a minimum of 32 kilometers per hour. A massive boiler and firebox grate area was required to generate enough power. A 64,000 litre boiler and 6 meter grate area was provided, over double the K-class, which was achieved by having a 484 wheel arrangement and was about 30 meters long. This would all come together in a perfectly balanced engine and gave the H a tractive effort of 245 kilonewtons, 60 kilonewtons more than the S. That's basically an S and half a K-class. The designers of VR really wanted to rectify a specific fault with the S. Even though the 3-cylinder Pacifics could haul trains at fast speed, they were extremely maintenance prone, especially when talking about the 3rd cylinder, which was prone to heat expansion. The cylinder block would then need to be taken apart and serviced. To solve this issue with the 3rd cylinder, VR switched from the Allies to the Axis. VR switched from Gresley's 3rd cylinder design to Henschel and Sons design. The H-class was also the first engine to include mechanical stokers, which was much needed and appreciated by the crew, as well as other modern features such as roller bearings, hydrostatically controlled load compensating brake gear on the tender, geez, try saying that 10 times fast, powered operated reversing gears, American style bar frame construction, thematic siphons, and dual blast pipes. H220 gave an indication of its strength on one of the aforementioned Spirit of Progress runs, where in the late 40s, it charged up the 1 in 50 Glenroy Bank at 72 kilometers per hour, 3 times the speed of the S, arriving at Seymour 13 minutes early, and arriving at Albury 20 minutes early. Except for that one time with the dynamometer car. I'll cover that later. Well, it's later now. The statistics from the short goods test runs from Melbourne to Ballarat show the engine was capable of developing 2,460 kilowatts of power at 80 kilometers per hour, with results reaching as high as 270 at 80 kilometers per hour. The Australian Railway Historical Society states the introduction of H220 is among the top 100 defining aspects of Australian railways, noting the test results from that very day. H220 had been worn out during the war years, and there was a backlog of things that needed to be done to the engine to get it back to at least decent condition, a task VR struggled with. The decision was made to not overhaul the engine and let it run a few more years until it was literally falling apart. It would be soon replaced by the B-class diesels, which could haul far less than the H, but they could be run with a single driver and operated in multiple units. In August of 1952, 2 B-classes did the journey up the Islington Bank in 67 minutes, the same as 2 A2s, with all the benefits of a smelly, disgusting, ugly, unpleasing, hideous, grotesque, unattractive, awful, disgusting, unsightly, homely, unlovely, vile, monstrous, unbeautiful, horrible, unpretty, repulsive, uncomfortable, revolting, ill-flavored, loathsome, unhandsome, sickening, appalling, repulsive, abominable, nauseating, repellent, abhorrent, distasteful, horrid diesels, such as a lower axle load. Even though H220 was a one-off engine, which meant it would normally be underutilized or have a short operating lifespan, H220 racked up 1,322,660 kilometers in 15 years, being withdrawn for an overhaul on the 20th of May 1956. It never received that overhaul. You may wonder what happened to the engine after. Well, just wait 5 seconds. Heavy Harry remained mostly stationary and intact until 1960, when ARHS successfully established the Newport Railway Museum, which Harry entered in 1962. And to this day, it is still the star exhibit. Today, a locomotive with even a similar power output to the H is National Rail's NR Class diesel electrics. In 2008, 50 years after its official withdrawal, H220 was added to the Victorian Heritage List. The big man upstairs noted that, quote, H220 represents the peak of steam motive power technology in Victoria and warranted the state's highest level of heritage protection. In October of 2020, local MP Melissa Horns allowed the construction of a new roof over H220 and other exhibits to protect them from the elements. Heavy Harry is also believed to be the last remaining 3-cylinder 484 locomotive. From all accounts, H220 was a success. Even though it was put to work on a line it wasn't really designed for, it managed to survive longer than its biggest competitor. Where's the S now? Halfden! That's where!